my last video, I talked about the differences between a sole proprietorship and an LLC, the pros and cons of both, and some situations where it might be appropriate to form as an LLC for your business. So if you're at that point, you decided, all right, I think I'm ready to form an LLC. What do you do next? Where do you go from here? You come right here, of course, because right now, today, I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to form an LLC. Hi, everyone. I'm Attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Colorado. This is All Up in Your Business. If you're new to All Up in Your Business, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and click that little bell so you get notified anytime I post a new video. Before we get into the good stuff, just a little bit of the boring stuff. While I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer. The stuff I talk about in this video is not a substitute for actual legal advice. If you need help with any legal situation, you should consult with a lawyer who's licensed in your state. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get into forming an LLC. First, just a quick little bit of background. What is an LLC? LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. It's a business entity that is formed with the state. One of the main advantages, really the primary advantage, the reason most people operate as an LLC is because it gives you, the owner or the member, liability protection, limited liability. It means that you as the individual owner, the person who owns the LLC, won't be liable for the debts, liabilities, obligations of the LLC. It's a separate legal entity from the owners, and so the owners are protected from the LLC's liability. Another big advantage of the LLC, though, is that especially compared to other entity types like a corporation, LLCs have a lot more flexibility and generally some more freedom in how they are formed, how they're operated, how they're managed, and not so many rules and regulations, obligations that an LLC must follow compared to a corporation. So you get that liability protection that you would with a corporation, but you get some of the more easy flexibleness with the LLC, and you avoid double taxation, which occurs in a corporation. An LLC is considered a pass-through entity for tax purposes, and so the IRS basically treats it as if the LLC doesn't exist. The profits and losses pass through to the members, to the individual owners, and the members report their share of the profits and losses on their personal tax returns, on a Schedule C to their personal tax returns. So it's a nice little almost hybrid of a maybe sole proprietorship where you're taxed at the individual level, same way you are with an LLC, but you get those benefits, those liability protection benefits that you get with a corporation. Of course, it's always best to consult with a lawyer to determine if forming an LLC is appropriate for you, if it's the appropriate entity type for you and your business, and it's always best to have a lawyer help you through the process. But not everyone can do that. Not everyone wants to work with a lawyer. And generally speaking, a lot of this stuff, a lot of the steps I'm about to get into can be done yourself. So let's get into it now. Step one in forming an LLC, you're going to want to choose a name for your LLC. What's our LLC going to be called? Overall, generally, LLCs, there's not really a lot of rules with what you name an LLC. Sometimes certain professions have rules about what you can or can't name your business, but for the most part, the only requirement for an LLC name is that it be unique. It can't be the exact same as an LLC that already exists with that state. It's state specific, so the fact that there's an LLC in some other state with the same name, that in itself isn't going to affect if you can use the LLC name that you want to use. So it has to be unique. It can't be identical to another name that's registered in your state. And it has to include some designation of it being an LLC. The most common is that you put that LLC acronym at the end of the name. LLC, L period, C period is another option. LTD, limited, is another option that a lot of people go with. But some sort of indication that this business is an LLC must be included in the name. Most states will have some name availability search tool on their websites. So this is all done through the Secretary of State in the state where you want to form the LLC. And most Secretary of State websites will have some name availability search. So you can find that tool at the Secretary of State's website, type in the name that you're interested in using, and it will tell you if the name is available or not. So step one, we've got the name figured out. Step two, we're going to need to appoint a registered agent for the LLC. The registered agent is the person or the company that's appointed to receive service of process on behalf of the LLC. Service of process means if the LLC is sued, the company, the person who's suing the LLC has to serve the LLC with a summons, court paperwork to notify them that they've been sued. And the registered agent is the person that's appointed to receive that important court paperwork on behalf of the company. The registered agent may receive other important notices and other important documents on behalf of the LLC as well. There are a few requirements for who can be a registered agent. As far as I'm aware, at least, any member of the LLC can be the registered agent themselves. So if you're a single member LLC, often you as the member can be the registered agent for the company. But typically the only requirements are that the registered agent has to be 18 years of age or older, and they must have a physical location in the state where the company is formed, where the LLC is registered. And they have to consent to being the registered agent. So again, like I said, if you're the single member, you can typically be the registered agent for your own company. There are also a lot of registered agent services out there, companies that perform this function for other companies. They act as the registered agent. I'm a big fan of those. It makes things easier. It makes it so you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to miss receiving this important document? You've got a designated company that's going to act as the registered agent for you. If you're looking for a good registered agent service, I have a few companies that I've worked with and that I really like. I will include some of those resources down in the description if you want to see some of the registered agent services that I've worked with. Hey, little bird. So we've got the name figured out and we know who's going to be our registered agent for the LLC. Now we move on to the actual formation of the LLC. This is done by filing a document called the Articles of Organization with the Secretary of State. Most states call it the Articles of Organization. Some states call it something else, like maybe a certificate of formation. It's not always called the Articles of Organization, but usually that's what it's called. And the Articles of Organization are filed with the state. The office that it's usually filed with is called the Secretary of State. So pull up, get on Google or your favorite search engine, type in Secretary of State for blank, the state that you're in or the state that you want to form the LLC in. And then there should be some easy way to navigate to their business filings to form a new business. And then you'll see the form that needs to be filed to create an LLC. Usually that's going to be called the Articles of Organization. Many states, these can be filed online, strictly online. You don't usually have to mail in the form. Perhaps some states do make you do that, but most states are almost 100% electronic now, and you can submit the Articles of Organization right there online. The exact requirements for the Articles of Organization are going to vary state by state. Usually they're going to ask for, of course, the name of the LLC. They're going to ask for the address, the principal office address of the LLC. This is kind of the primary main location where the LLC is going to be based or where it's going to be operated. The Articles of Organization are typically going to ask about the management structure. Is it member managed or is it manager managed? In a member managed LLC, that means the members, the owners, the managers are in charge of the LLC. They act as agents for the LLC. They can bind the LLC to legally binding documents. They can make major decisions on behalf of the LLC. And they're also in charge of the overall operation, like under what circumstances will the LLC be dissolved, for example. In a manager managed LLC, the members will elect one or more managers who will be the agents of the LLC and can make these big decisions and legally bind the LLC. Again, if you're not sure which one's appropriate, member managed or manager managed, it's a great idea to consult with a lawyer about that. And then the Articles of Organization are where you're going to put that registered agent information. You're going to need to include the name and the address of the registered agent that's been appointed for the LLC. And then you file the Articles of Organization. Typically, there's going to be a cost associated with this. Again, it varies state by state. I'm licensed in Colorado. I form a lot of Colorado LLCs, and Colorado's filing fee is $50. But a lot of states have their fees vary a lot. I believe California is $800. I may be off on that. That might be their like regular additional, annual filing. I don't know. Check the state, the Secretary of State in your state if you want to know the exact filing costs for an articles of organization in your state. I don't know all of the states. I'm sorry. Like I said, you can do this yourself. It depends on the state, but usually it's pretty straightforward. They're not super detailed, these articles of organization, so you can do it yourself. I recommend, of course, to work with a lawyer. Have a lawyer do this for you so you know you're not messing anything up. There's also an option to use an online filing service, an online business formation service. These can be a really good resource. I usually don't recommend doing that if your business is going to have more than one member. If you're a single member LLC and you don't want to work with a lawyer, but you also don't want to do it yourself, then an online filing service is a good middle ground. They'll help you through it. They'll take care of the heavy lifting for you, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than working with a lawyer. I've got some services that, again, I've worked with and I'm really familiar with and that I trust and recommend. I'll link to those down in the description as well. I mentioned also that you will need an office address. Your LLC is going to need an address. If you're working from home, your home address should technically be that office address that you put on the articles of organization. A lot of people don't like to do this though, because in most states, at least as far as I'm aware, if not all, that address is going to be public. Not all of us like having our address be publicly available. So in that instance, if you want to avoid using your home address, I like using a virtual office address. I'm a big fan of Alliance Virtual Offices, and I've got a promo code to help you save some money with Alliance Virtual Offices if you set up a new virtual office. I'll include all that down in the description. All right, so once the articles of organization are submitted to the state records them, makes it official. There you go, the LLC is formed. Is your job done? No, I'm afraid it's not. You don't just file the paperwork and everything's done, you're good to go. Unfortunately, there's some more stuff you have to do after that. The next thing, step number, I guess this is 5, 3, 4. I think this is step number 4. Create an operating agreement for the LLC. The operating agreement is kind of like the LLC's Bible. How is this thing going to be operated and managed and run? This is especially important when there's more than one member in the LLC, because the operating agreement describes how this relationship is going to go down between the members. How are we going to make decisions about the business? How are we going to decide when we take distributions of profit? How are we going to decide when we pay ourselves from this business? Under what circumstances might we dissolve or close the business? What happens if one of the members wants to get out of the business or wants to sell their interest to somebody else? The operating agreement should address all of that. But even in a single member LLC, it's still really important. It might be important because the state might require it. Not all states require an operating agreement, but some do, even for a single member LLC. So again, check with your state or consult with a lawyer to see if it's required in your state. But even if it's not required, and even if you're a single member LLC, it's still a good idea to do it, because having an operating agreement helps to show that this is a legitimate business, this is a legitimate business entity that's being run properly. And that is important to keep that liability protection that the LLC gives you. If the LLC is ever sued, one of the first things that is going to come up is, where's the operating agreement? What does the operating agreement say about this? What is the operating agreement? How might it play into this? And if you don't have one, that's not going to look good. And it can put you at risk of this thing called piercing the corporate veil, where the members might now be held personally liable for the stuff that the LLC did. So having the operating agreement is going to go really far in helping to avoid that thing of piercing the corporate veil. Again, a lawyer, if you're working with a lawyer, they're going to usually prepare that operating agreement for you. If you've used an online service, an LLC formation service, they'll typically give you kind of a basic form operating agreement. Like I said, with a single member LLC, that's usually going to be okay. But if you have business partners, if there's more than one member in the LLC, it's going to be especially important to have a lawyer prepare that operating agreement for you, because you want to make sure it properly addresses how do we as a group want this business to be managed and operated. After we've got the operating agreement done, we're going to need to get an EIN or a tax ID number. This is something that we obtain from the IRS. It's like the Social Security number for the LLC. You can apply for an EIN online at irs.gov, and it's free. There's no cost associated with it. And your LLC is going to need it usually for a few different reasons, potentially. If there are more than one member in the LLC, if it's a multi-member LLC, then you're going to need it for tax purposes. The IRS requires it. But with a single member LLC, it's not legally required that you have an EIN, but you're still usually going to need it for banking purposes. If you're opening a business account, a bank account for the LLC, which you're going to need to do, I'm going to talk about that in just a sec, the bank is going to need that EIN. So even if it's not required for a single member LLC, it kind of is. So we're going to go to irs.gov and apply for that EIN. Next step, like I just mentioned, you're going to walk your pretty little butt into the bank and you're going to open a business bank account for your LLC. This is incredibly important. Like I said with the operating agreement, we have to do certain things to maintain and uphold that liability protection. Part of that is keeping things separate from the members and the business, because the business is its own separate legal entity and it needs to be treated as such. So that includes having a dedicated bank account or multiple bank accounts. You don't have to stop at just one. A dedicated bank account solely for business money. The money that the business earns goes into this bank account. The costs that the business has get paid from this bank account. It cannot all be done from your personal account. If you are paying LLC bills from your personal account, that's a big no-no. If you are taking LLC profit, like if the LLC is getting paid and that's being deposited into your personal account, again, a big no-no. Get a dedicated business bank account. I have a few banks, online banks, that I'm familiar with and a few that I've used myself that are really great for small business banking, and they make it really easy to open an account. Some have really cool features like integrations with other apps and stuff. I will include some info about some of the banks that I like down in the description. Outside of that, I usually tell people start with the bank that you already use for your personal accounts. It's okay if you have a personal account and a business account with the same bank. And if you already have a relationship established with a bank, talk to them, see what kind of offers they have for business banking. Then you're going to want to register for any local or state taxes, tax licenses. This is going to vary a lot depending on where you're located and the type of business you have. If you're selling taxable goods, then you're most likely going to need to get a sales tax license. You might need to establish an account or get a license with the Department of Revenue in your state. There might be other local or county taxes that will apply to your business and licenses you might need to get there. So check with the state, check with your city and your county. Better yet, check with a lawyer in your area to help figure out what kind of taxes, tax licenses you're going to need. Same thing with permits. You may need a business permit or multiple permits of some kind. Again, it depends. It varies depending on what you are, where you are, your type of business, all of that. Some areas, some cities might have just a normal kind of business license. If you're located here, you need a license to operate a business here. Some areas might have a home-based business license or permit. If you're operating a business from your home, you need a business permit to do that. Again, like I've said a million times, it's going to depend. Check with a lawyer ideally to help you figure that out. And then moving forward, as you start building your business, you're operating this business, keep in mind some of the things that you're going to want to avoid doing. Number one big mistake is not having an operating agreement, especially if there are multiple members. Not having an operating agreement is going to suck. The state has basically already written one for you if you don't create your own, but the state isn't always going to put rules that we want in our business. What the statutes and stuff say isn't always what we want to actually have. And even as a single member LLC, that operating agreement is going to be important in protecting your personal liability. Another big mistake is mixing or commingling your personal funds with the business funds. That's where that business bank account comes into play. So be sure to maintain separate personal and business finances at all times. Make sure you understand any tax implications of now forming an LLC and operating this business. Consult with a tax professional, a CPA, have someone help you with the finances, the bookkeeping, the accounting, all of that if you can. And the last mistake that is kind of common and should be avoided is forgetting about maintaining ongoing compliance and paperwork. Most states have some kind of regular filing requirement. In Colorado, we have to file a periodic report every year. In, I think, California, it's a statement of information that has to be filed, I think, every 3 years. Most states, if not all, are going to have some kind of regular filing requirement. So make sure you mark those in your calendar or sign up for alerts from the Secretary of State for when those things are going to be due. Make sure you're aware of what ongoing requirements are going to be needed. As I mentioned, a lot of this can be done by yourself. You can use a filing service, an online service to help you with a lot of this. But the best thing to do is work with a lawyer, consult with a lawyer for professional advice that is tailored to your specific needs. Forming an LLC isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's always best to have a lawyer advise you on what you should do for your situation and your business. That's all for this episode, folks. If you learned a thing or two, give me a thumbs up, won't you? Share this video with your friends. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Check the description for links to additional information and resources, like some of those registered agent companies, LLC formation companies, and all of the stuff I mentioned in this video. All that's down in the description. I talked very briefly mentioned paying yourself, taking distributions from the LLC, paying yourself from the LLC. If that set off little alarms like, wait, how do I pay myself from this company now? You're in luck, because I've got a whole video that talks about exactly how to pay yourself from your LLC. I'll put it right here and you can check it out. I'll meet you over there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.